in the tech space right now, and hearing from leaders in these spaces, in technical spaces, but specifically in cloud teams, to give their kind of expert opinions on the matter. So I think firstly what would be useful, here Nethmi's joined as well, brilliant, so just in time for the introductions, lovely. So I think what would be best is let's do a round of introductions. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Dee, Senior Talent Solutions Manager at Robert Half, and my specific focus is on the AWS Restart program, who I work very closely with Claire on, and have worked with Richard, James, and placed Nethmi as a result of the Restart program. But that is what I do across UK and Ireland to support underrepresented groups into the technical space for entry-level cloud and IT roles. Claire, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you for inviting me, Dee, and hi to everybody. So my name is Claire Spiller. I work at AWS. I'm a senior manager running the AWS Restart program across the EMEA region. So very hands-on role, and I also have a team of really talented program managers that deep dive into multiple regions. I spent the last couple of decades in tech reskilling, so very well versed in this topic, and it's certainly a topic that changes over time as well. So really looking forward to our discussion today. Thanks, Dee.
Thanks, Claire. And James Fox.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. Just a quick intro for myself. So director here at Protiviti in our technology consulting practice. I lead our UK enterprise cloud consulting practice, so helping our enterprise clients across a range of industries strategize for, migrate to, and then optimize in the cloud across a range of cloud providers. Prior to Protiviti, I did work for AWS in their professional services team, ProServe. So I have experience from both the vendor side as well as independent consulting side. And yeah, looking forward to discussing today.
Great, thanks, James. And Richard?
Thanks, Dee, and thanks for the invitation today. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Bull. I work for Capgemini, and my job is not too dissimilar to James, actually, as he was describing it. So I run our projects and consulting practice in what is cloud infrastructure services. That includes cyber, includes our cloud migrations, and also a number of other infrastructure-based projects. We work across all sectors: public, private, financial. And I also sponsor our early and emerging talent program in CIS in Capgemini, because it's a subject close to my heart. I think the more opportunities we can create for people, the better we are as an organisation. And we don't make boxes; we only work with people and deliver through people. So anything we can do to enhance that capability, the better.
Fab, thanks, Richard. And Nethmi, do you want to give an introduction?
Thanks, Dee. My name's Nethmi Wikrama. I'm a DevOps engineer at S&P Global, and I'm just here to share my story and how I got here.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand the baton over, as it were, to Claire, who's going to be our mediator for the day. So over to you, Claire. And yeah,
thank you, Dee. Right, before we dive in, I'd just like to say to everybody that's joined us, that's obviously not on camera because there's so many of us, please feel free to join in with the discussion. So if you have a question and you feel brave enough, please raise your hand, and I'm sure Dee will moderate those. And if anybody's got a question that they don't want to speak out loud and want to put that in the chat as we go, that would also be welcomed. We'll leave some time for general questions and answers at the end, but if there's any commentary as we go through the next hour, please join in on the comments as well. So let's dive into our discussion then. So James, I'll come to you first. How has cloud developed over the last years, and how have businesses changed and adopted new ways of working when using cloud technologies?
Thanks for that. So I was just quickly Googling there when AWS was founded or launched, which surprisingly was back in 2002, which is crazy to really think that cloud I guess from an AWS specific way, has been around 21 years now, which is quite surprising for most people on the call, and particularly people in industry. I think there was probably a fairly long lead time of the origination of the infrastructure as services, which was the building blocks essentially where AWS started, through to really where we see the large scale enterprise adoption now. I think originally it was primarily leveraged or taken advantage of by startups, and it's probably in the last 10-15 years where we've really seen that adoption within the enterprise space across a range of industries. I think it'd be fair to say cloud was originally seen as quite a technical thing. It was kind of seen as a bit of a plaything by the techies from a lot of industries. And again, we're seeing that that's really evolved from a maturity perspective, but also an awareness thing across the business landscape. So cloud was historically owned by the CIO, the CTO. That's really started to permeate across the organization now, where you're seeing CEOs, COOs, CISOs taking ownership, getting involved in cloud adoption, and viewing that as critical to their broader digital and business transformation agendas. I think one of the terms I haven't trademarked it yet, but I kind of view cloud really as the plumbing for digital organizations. Kind of without cloud these days, you will really struggle to achieve true kind of digital identity in the modern world. I think we also saw as well during the pandemic how cloud was really instrumental in helping a lot of enterprises scale up remote working. If we look back in the dark days before the pandemic, there was a lot less people working from home. There was a lot less collaboration platforms like this being used. And it was very hard to access enterprise systems remotely, typically through on-premise VPNs appliances which were provided. The pandemic hit, and there was really a need to scale up almost overnight that remote access. So we saw a lot of enterprise clients shift their VPN access into the cloud to provide that instant scalability. We've seen things like Teams and various other collaboration platforms, which are all enabled by the cloud under the covers, scale up as well. And so that's really where I think we see cloud has permeated from being just a term that techies use to now cloud is all pervasive, coming back to, I guess, the original term of cloud being out there in the ether. So it's really out and about and everywhere now. And that, if I had to summarize, would be that evolution from a techie kind of thing really now to a business tool that's being used to drive transformation essentially.
Yes, lots of really interesting points in there to unpack. And I think the bits that resonate with me is that cloud has meant that tech isn't just the tech playground anymore. I think even HR managers and CEOs are really having to embrace technology as it's fundamental to everybody's business now. And most of us, even lay people, know something about tech and how it's implemented to help their roles, don't they? An interesting article was written by Ernst & Young recently as well that said, to your point about the pandemic, that they think most people accelerated their digital adoption by 6 years during the pandemic alone, which shows what we can all do when we're tested to be more resilient and adapt, doesn't it? And it's certainly meant that for us working in the skills arena has put a lot of pressure now on that skills gap. Richard, did you want to add anything in terms of what cloud technologies means right now in terms of the usage and the effect of COVID and what's happening now?
Well, it's funny, as James was talking, I had a conversation with a client yesterday, and he was talking about Teams and just how it has fundamentally changed their organization. And this is they're quite an old school organization, so I won't name them, that wouldn't be right. But he was saying they were always Monday to Friday in the office. That was how they worked. That was what they did. They all had their desk phones. They all had the way of working. And he was saying, right, we're now going to take away all the desk phones. only using Teams. So then we had a conversation about, so where's the resilience and all that? Where's the continuity and all of that sort of stuff? And it's fundamentally changed the way people work. You know, none of us ever, you know, in a work environment, go on a meeting without Teams. You know, there's always going to be somebody in there, and it's become accepted as well. So I think that flexibility it's introduced into the workplace is fantastic, and we got given that gift, if you like, during one of the things that came via COVID, but actually it is also enduring as well. It's brought a lot more flexibility into the workplace for people as well, and it's accepted. We haven't all got to be face to face all the time. I mean, it's nice to connect, right? I'm in the office today, but it's brought about a massive cultural shift, I think, in the way we work, and it resonates with what you say about how it accelerated everybody by 5 or 6 years for the good. I think for the good.
Yeah, I would agree it was for the good. I mean, from a personal experience, and you were talking about flexibility, I've got 2 young boys, so
Right.
suddenly I've managed to make the odd swimming lesson and things after school, which I would never have been able to do before. But at the same time, I feel really connected with my colleagues in the US, for example, which again, I probably wouldn't have felt so connected just being in the office, not being on virtual calls all the time. So it's made a huge difference to my work life and my home life, actually. And then not to mention just the collaboration, but just being able to access data really quickly and crunch it and then add data that other people can see in real time. It's just made such a huge difference. And the technologies have definitely become more user friendly as well for people that, you know, they're more intuitive now as well, aren't they? Before we move on to the next question, Nethmi, I just thought I'd ask you, you've obviously joined an organisation post-COVID, and I'm sure you've been able to have experienced some of that flexibility. How have you found joining a technical team with cloud technologies in the recent, when did you join, Nethmi?
In December last year.
Yeah.
And my whole team's pretty much based in the USA. So around 3 o'clock is when we have our morning stand up. So it's like they come on and they're like, "Good morning, guys," and it's like 3 o'clock here. It's very weird, but yeah. In terms of working with with my team in USA, Teams has been amazing. It's just so useful, and I get to speak to my whole team just within that.
Yeah, and you get used to it, don't you? When I met my team in person for the first time, it was like we'd always known each other. I mean, who'd have thought that would have happened? But there we go. Right, let's move on to our topic for today then, which is really about more attracting more females into tech. And we've got a really diverse panel here today, which is great to see. So let's talk about why it's important to talk about women in tech. And for me, there's a few different angles of this. The first thing is to say that women are hugely underrepresented in tech. And when we drill down into cloud, would you believe only 8% of roles are filled by women? 8%. And we're in 2023. That seems unbelievable that we're still saying that. And from the other angle, there's a huge, well-educated workforce out there in STEM technologies that don't even access the workforce in tech. So a report I was reading the other day says that only 23% of STEM educated women find themselves working in technology. So as an employer, there's a hugely educated workforce out there that we're not tapping into at all. And then if you look at other applicants, another report I was reading was saying not just based on women, but just general applicants are more likely these days to look at the makeup of an organisation before looking for a job. So for those that are looking to work in tech and as an employer trying to attract strong talent, if your organisation is sustainable, has really open dialogue about its goals, and is really invested in diversity, applicants are more likely to want to come and work for you. So there's a whole host of reasons why attracting more women into tech is right for women out there, right for employers, and right to attract the right applicants outside of even women into your business. So Dee, I wanted to come to you, if that's all right, and ask you, what are the biggest skills, ways of working, differences that you think about bringing women into the workplace, particularly in technology roles?
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, both men and women bring valuable assets to the table, and I think that's, why diversity is so important is having that difference and embracing that difference within a team. But I think we can't escape the fact that half the planet is made up of men and half the planet is made up of women, and yet within the tech space, only 20% of the sector is made up of women. And to your point, what did you say? 8% is in
8.
cloud? Yeah, which is tiny, very small proportion. I think, it's often considered that women have higher levels of emotional intelligence and collaboration abilities, and leading people through change. And women will have a different way of thinking about challenges and how to address finding solutions. And I think different approaches is a vital ingredient in a business to producing the best outcomes in a workforce. So clearly why it's so important. And I think just not stopping at gender either, but reviewing ethnicity, disability, LGBTQ plus, neurodivergence. I spoke with Richard a little while back about a neurodivergent program he was also running, and just embracing all of that stuff and thinking broadly about different educational routes and socioeconomic backgrounds, and bringing all of that collectively, that diversity into a workforce to create that equality of thought, I suppose. And then to add to that, on top of it, I think to look at this from a customer perspective, customer centric perspective. The customer is going to be gender diverse, and a business is only going to do well, or they are going to do much better if they can mirror their customer base. So I think if they fall short around women in leadership, they're going to fall down in performance too. Um, and to James's and Richard's point, I think the pandemic, it made that shift, it forced that shift, and businesses kind of realized that they had to give people more ownership and more flexibility in the way that they worked. And that shift in mindset, I think, is the thing that's helped, as you said, Claire, about giving that kind of flexibility to managing being a woman in a full-time job, a high performing job that you do, and also that built-in flexibility to combine your family life. And it just removes those barriers to entry into the workforce for working mums, but also for businesses to bring in talent and retain that talent as well, once they've poured in that investment piece into somebody. And I think this is just a subject, it's just super critical for organizations, and it's not a topic that's going to be going away. So I think we all recognize the diversity is good for business performance, and because of that the world's now changing, and it's this movement, I think, that ensures the a diverse workforce kind of at every level. It's being measured, it's being demanded, it's being talked about. I hear it all the time at every event, every hiring manager that I speak to. It's being talked about by suppliers, by customers, regulators, and potentially and possibly the most important of all, reputation as an employment brand, which I think you've already touched on. So kind of I think really that investment piece is key. And I think when you're thinking about how to invest into a business, your first investment should be its people, and diverse investment. And I think it's going to give you a return like no other. And my final point on this, I think, is it's just the right thing to do. We're in the 21st century, and it's absolutely the right mindset to be having with this approach.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of those points, Dee. Thank you. I want to come back to the broader skills gap that we've touched on, but before we do that, Richard, I'm keen to come back to your introduction. You said you champion sort of some of the more linear programs across Capgemini to attract more talent into the business. So talk to me about what Capgemini have been doing and the initiatives you work on to really address the gender imbalance.
Well, there's a number of things we're doing, and I almost describe it as a number of channels, really, because we do things like Code First for Girls. We've got something called Cyber Angels, and we're deliberately doing it to talk to and establish that actually we're going out there to do this, and we're doing it with AWS Restart, and we've done it with an organisation called Ambitious About Autism. And there's a business reason for doing it, right? Because you want to fish in more ponds. There is a talent challenge. You want to be able to attract people into your organisation, and if you can give them the training, you're going to be able to retain them. But what we then do when we bring them in, and AWS Restart was a good example. We brought people in with a capability. They'd done the Cloud Foundation, and they came in with a capability, and that gave us almost a landing zone to then push off and actually carry on with their development and grow them as individuals in their organization. But importantly as well, it made acceptability into the organization much easier. They came in with a skill set. They weren't, the rabbit in the headlights wondering, oh my goodness, what have I taken on? They were in with a skill set that allowed them then to assimilate into the company much more easily. And we had to do all this onboarding remotely, very similar to Navimi's story there. We had to do all of this remotely, but it allowed them to come in. And what for me, there is a business outcome, as I've said, of opening up different channels of recruitment, different ponds to fish in, rather than everybody trawling through LinkedIn, tapping up people on LinkedIn and doing it that way. That's a suboptimal way of doing it. And actually, you tend to bring in the people that are moving anyway. I want people who are going to grow and build a career in our organization. I say to the EET stuff, if this works, you pay my pension. This is a great result for me. So there is this very selfish reason for doing it. But also, they are our leaders of tomorrow. They will grow and they will develop into roles. And I know that when we get people in, we've got great systems for training and developing them. We've got great pathways, but we've got to be able to attract them in. And Dee's point there about people look at an organization, they want to see people like them in an organization. If they've employed Fred, then they're going to employ me. I might have an opportunity as well. It really does resonate with people, that outside image. So for me, it's very important.
So how do you attract people in, Richard? Because you've spoken about hiring from programs that exist, but obviously it's not a given that you approach somebody or somebody's on a program and they'll just accept a job, because there's lots of vacancies out there. So what do you do in Capgemini that really speaks to the different groups to make them want to come and work for you?
Well, AWS Restart was a good example, because the cohort that Dee ran for us was it was an all-female cohort, and Dee will tell you this story. My wife made me go and talk to Dee, because they'd done some recruitment, and she'd heard about this AWS Restart program, and my wife said, you should go and have a look at this. And obviously, I do exactly what I am told. So I went and had a look at it, and I thought, this is really good. This is really good. But what I wanted to do was not just wait to the end of the program. We went to talk to them halfway through about what Capgemini was and what we were about. And it was sort of an opportunity to ask us questions. And it was an opportunity then to tell them a bit about what we do, because they might not want to work for us. And we did something very similar with the Cyber Angels program we've been running, and Code First for Girls. We get involved quite early on to talk to them about us, because people have lots of choices and can go to different places. And what that then enabled us to do was, as people came more towards the end of the program, this AWS Restart is a particular example, we were able to we were able to then sort of talk to people about the various roles and get them into the right part of the organization that worked for them. And I think it's that the other bit that does, because my organisation is roughly UK, it's about 1,000 people, so there is a level of churn in our organisation, but it made my resourcing team also acknowledge that they've got these people coming into the organisation. So don't go anywhere else. They've got to come in and they've got to do a real job. That's where you're going to get them from. So it sort of came into my recruitment channel as well, and my resourcing channel. It wasn't wasn't a nice ambition or a nice thing to do. It actually said, well, actually, we're going to recruit 30 early career folk this year, say. We're going to take them in these different cohorts throughout the year, but X amount are going to come from these channels. And we made a commitment with the resourcing team to say, and we've even written it into some of our contracts, you will go and get people from these particular channels, because, as Dee said, it's the right thing to do in the 21st century. But also, you're creating opportunities for people who never maybe realised that they could have a career in IT. And that's when you do that, that is brilliant, right? You suddenly show somebody that they could have a career that they never thought they could have. It's personally fulfilling. Yeah,
you can see the passion that you have for it as you speak. James, I'm going to come to you with the next question. So we've spoken about attracting more females into role. I want to talk a bit more about the support you need to potentially give women when they land in your business. So how do you look after them? How do you retain them as a business? What other factors do you think you need to put into place?
Yeah, I think I was just reflecting on points from Dee and Richard, and one of the big ones that resonates for me is that I don't think we covered it specifically, is really around role models. So having female role models in all levels. So we, through our recruitment process, we strive to, when we do have female candidates, is to get females interviewing. I think that is beneficial, can provide better perspectives, can help sometimes to build better rapport during the interviews, maybe put the candidates at ease. So we really strove to do that. But a key thing for me and for Protiviti really is to get those role models both in leadership positions, but also in some of the junior grades as well. And so when we are going through the recruitment process, so prior to joining, is really allowing candidates to reach out to some of our female colleagues who already work with us to ask questions, understand the work life and so on. And then the other side of the fence is when we do have successful candidates joining us, is ensure that there's those pathways and access to the senior role models, female role models, who provide that access, who are visible in leadership events, but also outside of that across all of our events, and making sure that they feel like they have an open door policy for new joiners across all grades. In terms of retaining, that's a key aspect, but also from a more day-to-day perspective, we've got things like our parents network, which was put in place really amongst our employees to review and devise a set of offerings which really help parents. I know I'm using parents there generally, it's both males and females, and having an 18-month-old, I've really experienced the benefits of that over the last 18 months as well. So putting in place things like short-term support, whereby your child's ill and you maybe need short-term childcare, things that can start to break down some of the challenges that you'd experience as both a new and as a more experienced parent, as you kind of have built up a number of years. But there's going to be things that jump out at you, and I think childcare is one of them. It's not always a challenge, the primary challenge for women aspiring to move up. I think for me, it's really from experience has been the lack of role models, particularly in IT, and secondly in cloud. And it's been something that we've really tried to work on. I'm quite proud to say our team is just under 50% split of male and female from a cloud perspective. That's been really challenging to get to from a recruitment perspective, and that was where I was reflecting on Richard's point there, in terms of there is quite a very small pool of candidates to go out to, and so exploring all of these different programs and innovative ways of finding new talent. But I think we really need to be investing in talent for the longer term. I think we're dealing with a historical challenge of primarily men going into STEM, and so we're living that delay now, and I think we really need to go back to basics and really drive and encourage that, and some of the coding pieces that Richard spoke about there are really important in terms of encouraging girls into STEM, which would hopefully then will experience the benefits over the longer term.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from both of you is that your actions have been really deliberate. You've had a really strong, first of all, vision. You've got other people on board with that across your organisation in various different roles. you've set a joint goal, and then everybody's worked towards it to execute, and then you've had an eye on the long term as well as the short term. So a really kind of deliberate and well executed plan, which I think is something that is fundamental to make a success of any hiring campaign, let alone just women in tech, for sure. And one of the other pieces of reporting that I picked up recently was a McKinsey report from actually only earlier this year. And James, you touched on female role models, which I think are incredibly important. But obviously, if you're an organisation that doesn't yet have many females in, it can be a bit of a catch-22. So McKinsey did a report around the importance of sponsors in organisations for women joining tech organisations, and the sponsors could be male or female. So it took away the pressure to already have to have females in the organisation. And what they found was, by hiring females and attaching them to a senior sponsor in their organisation, women felt 70% more heard, first of all. But from a business perspective, the ideas were implemented, more likely to be implemented, 200% more likely to be implemented. So from a business perspective, they're absorbing so many more ideas and utilising those ideas. And guess what? Retention was also really good off the back of that as well. So I think I'd just throw sponsors in there as another good idea for organisations really trying to not just attract, but really support and drive female hires to their potential as well. Right, we've had enough from employers and myself, so let's move to the star of the show, Nethmi, who has gone through this whole process that we've been talking about. So Nethmi, do you want to introduce yourself again, talk about where you're working, how long you've been there and what role you're doing?
Yes, thanks, Claire. My name's Nethmi, and I'm currently a DevOps engineer at S&P Global. Well, I'll start by telling you my story, pretty much. So I moved here when I was 10 years of age, and IT hasn't always been my plan. When I moved here, my education obviously transitioned from being in Sri Lanka to here, and then everyone was just telling me to go into different career paths, such as pretty much being a lawyer or a doctor. But then on the side of this whole thing, my brother was really into gaming. So because of that, I was exposed to tech the whole time. And I just really thought, if I get into IT, I can really just go into any sort of career path that I want. Because like you guys mentioned before, IT has become a fundamental of every industry. So yeah, I decided to go to college and study IT software. It was a BTech diploma. And then, sorry, I studied, and then I was trying to go to uni, but I had visa restrictions, so I couldn't get my student loan. And then I moved back home. I was working as a teaching assistant for a while, until my friend mentioned the AWS Restart course, and I was really interested in that. So I decided to give it a go. It was 3 months, really intense. And basically, I finished it. I booked my AWS exam, and then I got in touch with Dee. It was a really great experience because she told me to, sorry, just give me 2 minutes.
Okay. So I think whilst we've lost Nethmi, we'll just perhaps just do a quick overview of the Restart programme, because I'm conscious we've mentioned it a lot of times, even though this wasn't the purpose of the conversation. But for those that haven't experienced Restart, it's a reskilling programme for people that are unemployed or underemployed. It's a free access programme, as in it's free of charge to the learners and really accessible. You don't need any experience in tech to join. And that's the programme that Richard and Nethmi have been referring to. We reskill people into the cloud with AWS technologies, Linux, Python, Bash scripting. So as you said, Richard, it gives people those fundamental skills, which I know is great for an employer, but I think for the person that's being hired, they actually feel that they can contribute from day one as well, which I think is really important. So Nethry, no problem that you had to just jump off. I was just to explain what Restart was, because I was conscious that we'd mentioned it a few times, and whilst that wasn't the purpose of the conversation, I thought I would just take the opportunity to do that. So I'll come back to you, just picking up on your comment about you went to college to study software engineering. What was that experience like? How diverse was that class?
It was literally 2 girls, and I was the only girl that managed to finish the whole course. The rest were all boys. It was studying and in IT and being in all these classes. One thing I noticed was women were not the main part of it. It wasn't very diverse at all, and it kind of felt lonely because it was all boys. But I felt a lot more respected going into tech, and I felt like I had an equal, if not more, opportunity into getting a job and being recognized for my talents, if that makes sense.
It does make perfect sense, and from the way you've articulated your experience so far, it's clear that you're a really determined individual as well. You've really chased a career that you've discovered you want along the way. Before you broke off, you started to talk about your experience of applying for the job and going through that procedure. So I'm really interested to hear about that part of your career. So the transition from being on a training program to actually breaking into your first role in tech. How talk to us about that experience.
So yeah, Robert Half was working with the company that I did my AWS Restart with, and through that I got in touch with Dee, and having my exam booked during that time, I solely put time into getting my LinkedIn sorted out and my CV, and I got in touch with Dee specifically. I tried to get in touch with other recruiters, but it wasn't as I didn't feel as heard as much I did with Dee, and it was just a really good experience finding the job. And right after my AWS Restart, yeah, so sorry, feel like I'm all over the place. But yeah, so I wasn't really interested into going to DevOps. I was more interested in going to software engineering, but Dee talked me into it. She was very encouraging, and she was like, just go for it. I was like, right, okay, because it was the first job that I ever applied to after doing my AWS Restart. And then a couple of days later, she called me and she was like, oh, you got shortlisted. And I was so excited. I felt like that was one of the highlights of my life. And yeah, I felt like really honestly heard, and it was just an overall good experience. The hiring process and everything, Dee was there helping me the whole process. Yeah, so I got the job, and then it was amazing. Literally being where I am now after going through all these hardships, I just feel very grateful and proud. And I just want more women. I want to inspire more women to go into tech and just follow their path, because honestly, it has so many opportunities. And because technology is evolving immensely, I feel like there's endless opportunities to everyone, not just women, everyone, and in any age as well. Like, it's so good to just have some sort of technology background, I think, because tech is used in all the industries. But yeah.
And thank you, Nethmy. We heard earlier how important role models are, and actually how few there are out there. So I'm sure that other people will be following your career, and hopefully you'll inspire more people along the way, which I'm sure you will. In the environment you work in now, do you have female role models that support you in your organisation?
Not within my team. I've not met many women that's working in technology field per se, because the S&P Global, it's a global company, and my team's pretty much based in the USA, and it's pretty much all boys. But kind of used to it now, but I hope it changes.
Yeah, I'm sure it will over time. We are starting to see change, aren't we? You touched on an interesting point about DevOps being a role that you weren't really sure about going for. And earlier in the conversation, we were talking about the shift to cloud technologies, and what we probably didn't drill down into at that point is the shift of job roles that are available in cloud. So I'll throw the floor open to Richard, your nodding. I don't know if you want to contribute to that, of what the change of roles have looked like over the last few years. And for anybody studying cloud now, what type of roles would you be looking for? James, will come to you afterwards if that's okay.
We're seeing increasingly blended teams. So the most, with a number of clients now, we're running pods. So they've got instances in the cloud. They're also maintaining a legacy infrastructure. So we're seeing a need for more diverse capability in our teams, because everything's got to be secure. So secure by design, obviously, but then it's got to carry on being secure. So there's a cyber requirement, definitely. Some of the more recently, on some of the more innovative stuff we've been doing, we've been seeing increasing need for coding capability in what we're doing and what we're deploying and how we automate it. So automation is becoming much bigger in terms of what we're doing. And then, our organization, we will have sort of managed service contracts, and then we'll have projects, and often with a number of clients, we've got that integrated, and we're increasing that integration. So you're bringing in some of your ITIL knowledge, some of your specialisms around change management, some of your apps capability, your cyber capability, your dev capability, and you're starting to run that as one team. And I think that will create diversity in organizations, just by the fact that you're pulling people from different parts of the organization. And I do see that then evolving as organizations work in multi-tenanted models. They've still got legacy that they're trying to work out what they do with. They've still got quite a lot of infra that they're working out what they do with. They've got legacy apps, but that convergence continues, which requires more capability and more diversity in the team itself from a technical perspective.
And that setup of pods moving between legacy and cloud projects sounds like a great environment for somebody entering a tech career, just with the sheer diversity of different topics to cover. Sounds like they'll be working with lots of people of different abilities and backgrounds that they can learn from as well.
Yeah, again, going back to the conversation I had with this client yesterday, we were talking about a ServiceNow implementation, and he said the problem we had with the implementation is we couldn't get people off Lotus Notes. They were using Lotus Notes for all their all their stuff and all their backlog and everything like that. So we had to teach people about Lotus Notes in order to be able to make the change, because they couldn't divorce themselves from it. It was a really interesting conversation, but most organizations are like that. Unless you're a greenfield organization or a startup, you are going to have that mix, So
yeah. And you were saying earlier, James, that cloud was the playground for startups originally, obviously being products that you can flex, so you can buy as you need, pay as you go. But obviously enterprises are using them more now, and then this blend with legacy makes for quite interesting job roles. What are you seeing in terms of the diversity of job roles that are out there for somebody starting their career?
I think I'd probably have a split of non-technical and technical roles. I think that's an important delineation. Often when talking to clients, we head down the technical route, and it kind of comes back to my original point around that evolution from technical to business. We're really seeing a broad brush of non-technical roles in the cloud. So I'll throw out the buzzwords like agile. We're seeing a real push for agile ways of working. We're seeing things like product owners, business analysts, which is essential in the cloud world in terms of capturing requirements. So not necessarily having to know too much about the inner workings or the technical aspects of the cloud. And when we're going out and recruiting, I really try and emphasize that to candidates, that I'm not always looking for deep technology or deep cloud expertise. We need the advisory side. So I often look for strategists, people who can come in and help me really strategize with clients and help them talk in business speak. So translate from the techie world back into the business speak, which is really important. On the technical side, very much in line with what Richard's mentioned there earlier, we're really, I think some of the trends we're really seeing recently is around FinOps, so managing the spend and cost in the cloud is a really popular thing. And I guess if you reflect on it, it's not too surprising given the macroeconomic conditions right now that we're seeing going on. So the desire to really not just cut costs, but optimize costs, so spend in the right places is really popular, and something that I'd say for people to consider. That's kind of it's probably a role in the middle between the technical and the business world. So to the financial aspects of cloud through to technically how you could optimize. Cloud development. So as Nethmi spoke about there from the development world, and Richard mentioned, cloud operations. So for all of our clients who are shifting to the cloud, somebody needs to be there to look after it on a day-to-day basis. And so it's something that's often forgotten about in migrations, which is all about getting there, but it's then the operations piece of what's best practice from an operations side. And that can be technically operating, and probably some of the cyber pieces Richard spoke on there really fall into that operations piece as well, but also the non-technical side, so project managers who are able to manage the operations, and probably links into the ServiceNow conversation Richard was having in terms of ensuring the service management is there and wrapped around the cloud environments. And then last but definitely not least is the day one activity really around cloud security. So making sure that is baked in throughout both the development and the build, but also through to operations as well. So hopefully they resonate with people, and people can see there's non-technical roles and there's technical roles as well that is really needed from a cloud adoption perspective.
Yeah, and I think for those on the call listening that are looking to launch their cloud careers, there's lots of great advice there from all of you, that it's not just a few limited job roles that are out there. It's really worth researching the plethora of jobs that are out there, both from a technical and non-technical perspective. And any females that have been put off launching a career in tech because of the limited numbers of females we've said in cloud, in particular in the tech roles, it's worth saying it's much more equitable in those jobs you've just mentioned, James, around project management and product ownership. That's more like late 40s percentages of females in those. So if anyone's daunted launching a tech career, there's probably areas that you might feel more comfortable with if you want more females around you. So it's definitely not a closed book for all of the different job roles we've mentioned. So kind of looking to the future, Nethmi, I'm interested in where you are. I appreciate you've only just started your career, but you sound like one determined lady. So I'm interested in where you think your career might take you. So where do you think your next steps will be in your tech career?
I'm hoping to be senior DevOps. Like I said, I didn't want to go into DevOps in the beginning, but being in the job role and seeing everyone else within the company, that software engineers working on what they're working on, it's pretty much the same thing, I feel like. So I think to go into DevOps and carry on being in there and getting more knowledge in it and being more high level.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you've gone into a job that you hadn't considered before, didn't think you wanted to do, and that's where you see your career ending up. But I think it's a really good lesson for people starting out, and I certainly did this without realizing it. It's just good to dive into roles where you've been given the opportunity, because often the person interviewing you sees a fit for a role that you don't see in yourself, and it's worth just playing that out and having a go. And it's often actually where your strengths lie then. I'll flick the question back to Richard and then to James. So for anybody looking to reskill at the moment, we've spoken about job roles, but in terms of technologies, actual skills, where would you advise people to look? I guess in terms of vacancies, where cloud technologies is going, what skills would you advise people starting a career or looking to progress their career to really hone in on? Richard, can I come to you first with that question?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't.
Oh, I can go to James.
No, it's fine. Let me go. Let me give it a go. Because
no.
there isn't a single thread. Because it's similar to what James was saying. There is such a diversity as to what you can do. If I take a bit about project management, for example, that is definitely something you can learn in an environment. When we recruit into our PMO teams, we're looking for organizational skills. We're looking for people who can plan and organize. And, we said, oh, you've got to be agile, qualified, you've got to have your Prince qualification. You haven't. If you've got those organizational skills, we can take people in at a junior level and then develop them, because we've got all the training here to do it. And you know, when we're talking to grads and apprentices, particularly our apprentices who do sort of come from they've not got into further education, they've come straight from school or sixth form, you know, they're not going to have done any of that. So the very fact that they are able to demonstrate an organizational capability, we can then do the rest with them when they come in and take them through the degree. In the tech space, this is why AWS Restart has been really helpful for us, because it's given people a broader brush of understanding of the IT landscape and what they will be dealing with. The stuff you touched on there when you were just giving people a bit of background on it, Claire, around sort of coding skills, around building landing zones, around network understanding, etc. All of that gave people a broader understanding, and once they're in an organization, then we can do the rest, and we can develop them further. And like James, you know, if I can look at CVs, you know, to I'm blue in the face, but actually if I meet somebody with the right attitude and the right commitment and the rest of it isn't quite there, I'd go with that, because I know that if they've got that drive and that willingness to learn, and that's what you'll test out in some of your interview questioning, and you know, trying to get insight and understanding, then you're probably going to have a fair chance of success with that individual, and they're going to succeed in your organization as well.
Yeah, you definitely can't teach the enthusiasm bit, can you? That's the bit that you need to come across at an interview. James, anything to add to that point?
Yeah, I think just continuing that thread. So when we recruit, we're really looking for the general aptitude of general business skills, project management, ensuring that you're there, you're present, you come across well. The technical pieces, we are happy to invest and train people up. However, I would say, and I kind of always come back to an Andy Jassy quote when he was leading AWS, which was, there's no compression algorithm for experience. And that stuck with me. I think it's a really clever quote, and it really spoke to the fact that AWS had such a head start on other competitors. But if we apply that more broadly to ourselves, in terms of, if you're looking to get a job into the cloud, investing in yourself in terms of AWS Restart, but also there's nothing stopping you now with thousands, probably if not millions, of free courses online that you can take advantage of, covering anything and everything in cloud. And when I see someone's CV come across who has a list of courses maybe they've sat online, and maybe a couple of certifications that they've sat, that is something that shows me and reinforces that aptitude and desire. And things like Nethmi were saying, wasn't necessarily looking to do a DevOps role. Doing some of those courses can actually help you discover things that you don't want to do as well as you do want to do. And so Nethmi might have done a DevOps course and gone, actually, I'm quite interested in this. But likewise, Nethmi might have done a cloud FinOps course and gone, I really don't want to do this. This is not something for me. And so investing in yourself in terms of the skill sets and training is really going to help you in terms of gaining that experience. Volunteering, also doing some of your own little projects at home. So you can log into any of the cloud service providers. There's free tiers where you can spin things up, you can play around, break things. All of that is going to be great experience that will wrap up into both technical and non-technical roles in the future.
Thank you. I totally agree with everything you've said. Keeping a broad spectrum of skills and interests until you really find your niche. If you ever do, you might be a generalist, is really cool. I liked your earlier comment about cloud economics in particular. It's not something that somebody outside of technology might understand is quite a big topic area right now. And in terms of free content, there's a platform called AWS Educate that has a huge amount of free content on in bite-sized chunks. And one of those topics is cloud economics. So for anybody that hasn't got that in their kit bag of skills at the minute, that's a great place to go to for that. There's a few questions that have come up in the chat. So as we've got a few minutes before we close, I just thought we could address those. Nethmi, first of all, some great feedback for yourself, so thank you for joining us. Everyone's found your story really inspiring and has loved hearing from you. So you've already inspired people, which is one of the goals that you had, so thank you for that. we have got a question here from AO, who says he's got a solid background in software development and has just finished the Restart program actually. He wondered how male applicants stand a chance of being given a chance to prove their capabilities. Thank you for asking that question. I'm very conscious that the topic today is women in tech, but it's not the only important topic at all. Tech should be a really accessible career. So Richard, I know we've focused on women in tech. What programs outside of those that we've mentioned today or access points into Capgemini are available for early careers talent if you're not a female?
So we recruit via we have a graduate program, we have an apprenticeship program, we do internships as well. So you know, and obviously those channels are open to all. AWS Restart, the first cohort we did, it was just specifically an all women cohort, which but they are, you know, they are normally, that isn't normally the case. So there are lots of channels in, and you know, we're recruiting junior talent all the time. One of the things we do is we bring people in at the junior level, sometimes through a formal program, but also just through bringing them into our organization as a new starter and starting at that level and giving them the training program. They can then cut into some of those other programs, but they can join at junior levels. Yeah,
thank you. We seem to have lots of people in the audience that really think that they would love to work at Capgemini. I'm not surprised. The way you've described it sounds like a great place to work. Yeah. So for everybody asking those questions, there's obviously lots of entry points. I do agree that apprenticeships are a great second step from Restart as well. Not everybody goes into apprenticeship programs, but it dovetails really nicely into a level 4 apprenticeship as well. I'm conscious we need to wrap up in a few moments. So keen to see if there are any other questions for our panelists today. Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat or speak up.
I was just going to jump in, Claire, because I think actually just to keep to time, we have 1 minute to go. So I don't want to overrun or anything, but I do want to be able to say a big thank you for everyone who's attended today's webinar. I know everybody's schedules are really busy, but particularly for those that have been speaking, yourself included, Claire. It's been a hugely informative session. We've spoken about some really hot topics in the market and some really important topics in the market. And Nethmi, once again, thank you so much. It's great to have heard your story. I think it really is an inspiration to lots of people who are trying to make that transition. It's great hearing from James and Richard to show that is possible, the way that businesses are thinking of how they're trying to help entry-level talent into their businesses, into the market. And Claire, thank you so much just for everything that you do with AWS Restart. It's always a pleasure working with you. I love being a part of this this sector and helping individuals into entry-level roles. So yeah, thank you everybody for being here today. And yeah, I'll let you go. We are bang on 2 o'clock.
Thanks for organising, Dee.
No problem at all.
Thanks, Dee. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dee.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Gary? Gary?